done us all a great favour. He's revealed the illegal wars that have been fought in our names, spending our tax dollars on corporate military industrial armaments. This ongoing war must end. This ongoing war is for one purpose and one purpose only. It's to make money. It's to serve the corporate elite. It's to make the corporate elite richer. And we are paying the price. The people of the countries we invade are paying a higher price. We must stop. If we do not stop our government, we are like the Germans during the Second World War, who stayed silent. And the Nazis did their atrocities, their criminal acts, and they were brought before the Hague ultimately. And that's what we aim to do with our corrupt politicians. They ultimately will face the courts in the Hague. But we must do our duty now to Julian. Julian has brought these crimes to us. Now we must act. We must all stand up. And believe me, if we don't stand up now, we won't be able to stand up tomorrow, because our rights will have been taken away from us altogether. And we won't be here on 20 to remind you of what you're losing, because it will have been lost.
Last year, interviewed on Activism TV, UN torture rapporteur Nils Melzer said that when Julian's lawyers initially asked him to intervene on Julian's behalf, he declined. He had the first impression that Julian is a narcissist, a rapist, a hacker, spy, who would just manipulate him. After numerous requests, Melzer delved and discovered that the public narrative we have on Assange has been fabricated and is not true, and the evidence is contradictory. The whole rape allegations were fabricated by the Swedish police, and the women even said so in their text messages, said Melzer. He said citizens have power. The state power is not the property of government. You are delegating your power to the government, and they need to respond to you as to how they are using that power, or they don't deserve it. Secrecy is what prevents this from happening. Power plus secrecy equals tyranny, because it disempowers the people. It prevents them from exercising control over power. Secrecy is the most dangerous ingredient of governments. I think Julian knows this, and as an advocate of the truth, he worked to bring evidence of the corruption of the powerful to light. I think that made him a target by the powerful, and they've been vindictive and cruel in their persecution of Julian. If Julian is extradited to the US, he most likely will be held in the notorious Supermax prison ADX Florence. He'd be in a cell about the size of your car park in the local shopping centre. It's tiny. This prison is considered inhumane by its own staff. One of the wardens described it as a fate worse than death. Julian would most likely never see the light of day and be placed under special administrative measures, which means he could be deprived of phone calls, meals, visits, or interaction with other inmates. This is too much for any person to bear. Julian should be held in the arms of his loved ones and not in a US Supermax prison. The US and Biden can no longer call themselves defenders of freedom and democracy, while Australian Walkley Award-winning journalist Julian Assange is tortured and held in prison for exposing corruption and war crimes. This is the job of our PM, Scott Morrison, and Foreign Affairs Minister Maurice Payne to reach out to the US leaders and demand the release of Julian Assange and that all charges be dropped. And I feel he should be compensated for the treatment he's received. Free Julian Assange.
Assassinating children, women and innocent people just simply because a government wants to take control of their oil, for example. And we are entitled to know that that is happening. This is what Julian Assange did. He published that information. He gave us the opportunity to say to our governments, enough is enough. The charges that he faces are equivalent to 175 years imprisonment and the special administrative measures, which is really a euphemism for torture. So Julian Assange will be facing 175 years in prison. Obviously none of us live that long. He would die in prison. It's really a death sentence. And of course, Magistrate Barreza, when faced with that, and the fact that the prisons in the US are so brutal and that often they lead to people committing suicide or dying in those prisons, that she decided he should not be extradited. So at the moment we are waiting for an appeal that the US has lodged, and that appeal will have to be heard. And of course also Julian's defense team is thinking of lodging a cross-claim saying that journalists should not be prosecuted for doing the work of journalism. Journalists should be free to be able to publish information, even if that information is embarrassing to our governments. Julian is an Australian man born in Queensland. He is a journalist, a publisher. He is the creator of WikiLeaks, a website which permits the distribution of information in the public interest. That's what it is. In your interest, in my interest, that's where you find that information. In the words of his mother, Christine Assange, Julian is a courageous, multi-award journalist who revealed the corruption of those in power in the hope that us and our children will grow up in a world with more justice and freedom. That's what we're talking about. But that is the essence of Julian Assange and why we are here every Friday. We're talking about democracy and protecting our democracy and freedom of expression, that you have to say what you think is correct, freedom to talk about facts and not fake news, freedom to talk about corruption and stopping corruption. Julian is currently in a high security prison in the UK, and the UK has been too weak to put a halt to that prosecution. That prosecution was started by the Trump administration, but it has been continued by the Biden administration. This trial misrepresents the facts in order to bring the case within the bounds of an extradition crime. But it is a political trial, and our parliamentarians have also said that. There are 24 courageous parliamentarians here in Australia, in our federal parliament, who have created a group called Bring Assange Home. And they've said to our Prime Minister, enough is enough. This is a political trial. This is not a criminal we're talking about. We're talking about a journalist. We're talking about a publisher. Why should a publisher be in prison for publishing news, for publishing facts, for publishing the truth? Why do we prosecute and persecute and retaliate against people like Julian Assange, like people like lawyer Bernard Colliery, like people like David McBride? Why do we retaliate against them for telling us the truth? Because our government doesn't want us to know about these things. They don't want us to know about what they're doing for big business, for the big weaponry factories, for the big oil exploiting factories. They don't want us to know about that. They just simply want us to be like sheep following, the telegraph and so forth, and that's it. They don't want us to look further than that. Anyway, the material that Julian Assange exposed shows horrific war crimes in Afghanistan and Iraq. And it also shows torture of detainees in Guantanamo. Why should we simply remain silent in the face of torture? It is prohibited under the international law. It is prohibited in our law. No one who commits torture could be walking the streets like us here today. We as citizens must speak against those crimes. And that's exactly what Julian has done. The conduct, for example, that Julian disclosed, this torture being committed, is no different, I must remind you, to these embarrassing events where our military was involved in Afghanistan recently and where people were killed as well. And after it was in the ABC, we all said, my God, this should not be happening in Australia. But that's the kind of information for which Julian has been prosecuted and imprisoned. And he remains in prison because of that. Now we're talking about children being assassinated with machine guns. Now the whole of Australia has denounced this behavior, but Julian is imprisoned. These war crimes are the type of information that WikiLeaks disclosed. Mr. Morrison has done absolutely nothing to assist Mr. Assange to regain his freedom, despite the fact that Mr. Assange is an acclaimed journalist. Recently, for, maybe the 10th time, he has been nominated to the Nobel Peace Prize. He has more than 21 international journalistic awards already. We are proud of Mr. Assange. You as Australians should be proud of Mr. Assange, but he is in prison in the UK. Now, back in 2013, this Assange case was looked at by the Obama administration. And they said, no, we cannot charge Assange for anything. He's simply doing what other journalists have done, what the New York Times has done, what the Washington Post did, what the German newspapers did, what the Guardian did. So why do we charge Julian Assange when all these famous international media did exactly the same? They published that information about war crimes. It's because it is an individual. He's an easy target. He's an individual, so it's easy to tell you, don't follow Julian Assange, don't worry about him. We'll just destroy him. We'll destroy WikiLeaks. We'll destroy his capacity as an individual to bring us the news, to bring us information that is true and correct, factual. In fact, the US has never said that that information published was not true. They cannot say that because it is entirely true. It's information that they had, that they compiled, that they collected about their own deeds, grave deeds, criminal deeds, that it is their information that was published. We want our government to bring him back to Australia. He has a lovely family. He has a wife and 2 kids, his partner. The kids miss him. He's a dad who hasn't been able to be involved in the bringing up of his children because of this persecution. There's groups in Parramatta who want him back. There's groups in the suburbs who want him back. Now his dad is touring the eastern regions of Australia, and next Friday, John Shipton, Julian Assange's father, will be here with us at 6 p.m. and you please come along, meet him, talk to him, ask him about his son and what's going on at the moment. And also he'll tell you about that courageous group of 24 Australian federal parliamentarians who are also striving for Julian's release. Thank you so much for hearing us.
On the 5th of January, there was a statement on the Julian Assange extradition proceedings by Mark Dreyfus, the Shadow Attorney General. He said, Labor welcomes the decision to give priority to the health and welfare of Julian Assange.
Bravo!
Now that a British court has found that it would be unjust to extradite Mr. Assange to the US, Labor believes this has dragged on for long enough. While the US has the right to appeal the court's decision, we call on the Morrison government to do what it can to draw a line under this matter and encourage the US government to bring this matter to a close. Chelsea Manning, the US soldier who was convicted of leaking information to Julian Assange, had her sentence commuted by the US President in 2017. Labor expects the Australian government to provide appropriate consular support to Mr. Assange as his right as an Australian. Given his ill health, it is now time for this long, drawn-out case against Julian Assange to be brought to an end.
This is the 67th week of people gathering at Sydney Town Hall with the sole purpose of informing the public truthfully about the innocence of Julian Assange and the significance of his journalism. We are here speaking out because the mainstream media are complicit in the persecution of Julian and in protecting the powerful from the prosecution that should have resulted from the WikiLeaks disclosures. The mainstream media avoid reporting that Julian Assange is completely innocent, that he is being tortured, or that these facts are irrefutable. Instead, they continue smearing him in line with the interests of corrupt power. Julian's work of truthfully informing the public by providing authentic documents, proving government and corporate wrongdoing, is vital if the notion of Western democracy is to remain realistic. While the momentum towards achieving justice for Julian is building, we need many more people standing here with us to help convince others to broaden their view. We must not underestimate the power of media propaganda and manipulation. The media propaganda used to smear Julian Assange has been extremely effective and reprehensible. He would be free, and the war criminals he exposed would have been prosecuted if the propaganda being used was not effective. We must have the courage to stand up for the truth in the face of the media propaganda, which attempts to convince us we are alone and that our efforts are futile. We must have faith in ourselves. Every voice of truth counts. Every person standing in solidarity with Julian counts. Please join us every Friday evening from 5 to 7 p.m. here at Town Hall to demonstrate public support for Julian and for the ideals of free speech, justice, and democracy. We need governments and corporations to be transparent about what they do if we are going to trust them. In reality, there is a complete lack of transparency, which has created great distrust. We continually see governments and corporations participating in lies, distractions, cover-ups, and propaganda. War and the loss of our civil liberties are the result. We must be able to know the truth about government and corporate wrongdoing. The journalism of Julian Assange has meant that we are all much better informed than we would have been without it. We cannot allow the persecution of Julian Assange for his award-winning journalism to continue. If we are denied our right to view truthful information, none of us are free. If Julian Assange can be denied his freedom, none of us are free. If Julian Assange can be tortured through arbitrary detention, solitary confinement, and medical neglect, none of us are free. The political persecution of Julian Assange must, therefore, be stopped. The US and UK governments have had over 10 years to change their minds, but they continue torturing Julian, regardless of his innocence or the clearly observable trampling of his and our human rights. It is time for us all to act. We have truth on our side, which gives us unshakable confidence. We are doing the right thing. We are on the right side of history. We have corrupt politicians and media that don't give a damn about any of us, telling us how we should think and act. It is time for everyone to start thinking independently and taking responsibility. Freedom is available to all of us if we have the courage to know and speak the truth. We undermine our freedom by deferring responsibility to those who seek to control us through propaganda. Don't believe the propaganda. Choose freedom. Stand up for Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. In May. Julian Assange. Our mate. Inmate. Julian Assange. Our mate. Only one decision. There is only one decision. There is only one decision. Free, free. Free, free. Free, free.
Julian Assange! Hi there. We talk about quotes and that sort of thing. The t-shirt I'm wearing has a lovely quote from Julian Assange, and quotes are really good because they're examples of what important people have said. And this is another quote that we've just been given here, and it says, Julian Assange says, "Knowledge flows upwards to bishops and kings, not down to serfs and slaves."
Julian Assange said, "I saw that publishing all over the world was deeply constrained by self-censorship, economics and political censorship, while the military-industrial complex was growing at a tremendous rate, and the amount of information that it was collecting about all of us vastly exceeded the public imagination."
Okay, I think I must have done the change.
Julian Assange said, WikiLeaks is designed to make capitalism more free and ethical.
Julian Assange said, journalism should be more like science. As far as possible, facts should be verifiable. If journalists want long-term credibility for their profession, they have to go in that direction. Have more respect for readers.
Julian Assange said, democratic societies need a strong media, and WikiLeaks is part of that media.
Julian Assange said, if journalism is good, it is controversial by its nature.
Julian Assange said, you have to start with the truth. The truth is the only way that we can get anywhere, because any decision making that is based upon lies or ignorance can't lead to a good conclusion.
Only one decision!
No extradition!
Only one decision!